Everybody, welcome back to another episode of Shifty's 49ers Talk. Today, we're going to be continuing my mini-series of the 20 most valuable 49er players for the upcoming 2022 season. This is episode 3 in a series of 4. So today, we're going to be looking at players who I have ranked 10th through 6th in terms of most value for the Niners. Not necessarily the best, but the most valuable. Now, let's quickly run through who we've talked about already. So this will be from 20 all the way down to 11. We have Jauan Jennings, Kerry Hyder, Robbie Gould, Talanoa Hufanga, McGlinchey, Dre Greenlaw, Javon Kinlaw, Daniel Brunskill, Emmanuel Moseley, and Elijah Mitchell. That's who we have on the list so far. So now, without any further ado, let's get to the top 10. Coming in at number 10 is going to be wide receiver Brandon Aiyuk. Now, Aiyuk, I'm a huge fan of, and I was really disappointed last season when the first 3, 4, 5 games of the year where we really didn't see much of Brandon Aiyuk. I had a video where basically just asking, where is he? Seemingly he was maybe dealing with some nagging injuries. Some people mentioned that he was maybe, just not in Shanahan's good books at the time. Whatever the case may be, clearly as the season went along, he just stepped up his game. He made big play after big play in the 2021 season. Some of the huge plays, think about that that overtime touchdown against Cincinnati. That was awesome. He performed really well in the playoffs, even though Garoppolo missed him a number of times. But overall, look, the sky's the limit for a guy like Brandon Aiyuk. And I do think, honestly, that he should have a 1,000-yard season. There's no question that we have a lot of talent in terms of weapons for Trey Lance to use in this coming season. I think defenses naturally are going to put a lot of focus and attention to stopping George Kittle and Deebo Samuel. This really should give Aiyuk his opportunities for those one-on-one matchups. We saw what he did in the playoffs, let's say against the Cowboys, frequently just burning Trayvon Diggs, who a lot of people consider an upper echelon cornerback. So I think he's in for a great year, not only receiving, I think he actually could have the most receiving yards of any 49er receiver this coming season. That's how good I think Brandon Aiyuk is. But not only that, we might see him being used a little bit more as, we saw Deebo last year, maybe in the backfield. Of course, those end arounds. We saw what Aiyuk did in his rookie year, a number of great plays, coming out from the backfield. So I think we might see that a little bit more in 2022. I think Aiyuk is fantastic. I think not only is he a top 10 talent on the team, but in terms of his value, it's absolutely there. Defenses are going to be going all out to stop Deebo and Kittle. So we got to have that guy who can beat those one-on-one matchups, can make the big plays after the catch. He's fantastic. Just like any 49er receiver, he's great after the catch, but also his blocking is fantastic. We saw him get incredibly physical this season. I think it was against the Vikings. Him and Patrick Peterson got into it a little bit. You love to see that kind of intensity from a player at the wide receiver position. So I think Aiyuk is awesome. I think he's going to have a great year, and he is the 10th most valuable player this coming season for the Niners. Coming in at number 9 is going to be another offensive player, and that is Kyle Juszczyk. He is the offensive weapon. Juszczyk is might be the most versatile player on the 49ers. He can do literally everything. And look, even last season, he was holding field goals, for crying out loud. But offensively, we know how excellent of a blocker he is in the run game. In the pass game, there's a reason why Shanahan has him out there so much. He can go out to the end, be a wide receiver. He can play tight end. He can run with the ball. He can, after the catch, he's great. A number of games, unfortunately, similar to Aiyuk, where Garoppolo just missed Juszczyk on a throw. But Juszczyk is fantastic, and he's just so valuable to this team. There really isn't anybody. The closest to a Juszczyk is probably George Kittle, but Kittle is much more effective in his role at tight end. But Juszczyk can play that position excellent fullback, running back, can be a receiver. And clearly, we've put a lot of money into Kyle Juszczyk ever since he joined San Francisco back in 2017. And a lot of people criticize that move, considering how much money we were giving to a fullback. But man, I think he's just been amazing, and he's one of those guys that's just so reliable for the 49ers, in the right place at the right time, makes the right play. And he is so valuable because no one else can do all the things that he can do. So Kyle Juszczyk is coming in at number 9 on my most valuable players. Without him, I don't know where this offense would be. And coming in at number 8 is going to be safety Jimmie Ward. To me, Jimmie Ward might be one of the most underrated players in the entire NFL. The 49ers consistently over the last few years have had just one of the most, dominant defenses. We saw in 2019 how great the defense was. Last year, as the season went along, man, this defense was playing lights out under DeMeco Ryans. And Jimmie Ward is a huge reason for that. He made a number of big plays. He practically took over that game against the Rams at home where he had 2 interceptions, one of them for a touchdown. But he's just one of those guys where not only can he make plays like that, but he's in the right place at the right time. And he's really that one consistent guy who's been there in the secondary, through the last, almost since he's been here. But, he's one of the longest tenured, if not the longest tenured 49er on the roster, all the way back to the Harbaugh years of 2014. But what I really like about Jimmie Ward is the fact that he's become a vocal leader, back there in that secondary. And that was sorely, sorely needed, especially ever since Richard Sherman left, So it was someone that we really needed to step up, and he's done that. And he's going to have a big, big role this year because we know opposite him in that safety position, it's going to be Hufanga, who's, never been a full-time start in the NFL. Neither has George Odom. So it's going to be increase the responsibility of Jimmie Ward to make sure that everyone's communicating, everyone knows where they need to be lined up, and that just increases what his value is to the 49ers. Now, not only that, I do expect Jimmie Ward to have a good year, couple of interceptions, couple of, big plays to make. He hits hard. He really sets the tone back there in that secondary, and I think this secondary should be a much, much more improved over what we saw last year, especially with all the injuries we had last year. But Jimmie Ward, his value is, immense for the 49ers, especially considering that, we have a couple of new faces back there in the secondary this year, and we will have a couple of new starters there too. So Jimmie Ward is the 8th most valuable 49er that I have for this coming season. Coming in then at number 7 is going to be someone who shares the same last name as number 8, and that's going to be newbie Charvarius Ward, who we signed in free agency this offseason. Now, this is a fantastic pickup, not only because, look, it's a 3-year deal. It's not like we're giving a 6-7 year deal or anything like that. But the biggest thing, too, is that he's a guy who's just getting better and better and better. If you look at his PFF ratings, take that for what it's worth. They're fantastic. Just his ability to cover opposing defense's number 1 receivers. And just think about how valuable that is for the 49ers, considering the division that we play in. So we have to go up against, 6 times a year, we're going up against either Cooper Kupp and Allen Robinson, DeAndre Hopkins, Rondale Moore, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett. There's so many fantastic players. And then, of course, so many teams across the league just have great offenses. We're going to be going up against Kansas City this year. The Chargers have a great offense. The Raiders now have Devontae Adams. The Broncos have a bunch of young, good receivers. The list kind of goes on and on and on. So it's having a guy who can be out there and can really, play up to those number 1 wide receivers as the number 1 cornerback, it's going to be huge. We saw the impact that a guy like Richard Sherman had in 2019. I think in a similar way, Charvarius Ward could have that kind of impact for this defense. We know our defensive line is fantastic. We get a ton of pressure all over the place, and that's really going to allow guys like Charvarius Ward to flourish. The one knock on him is maybe he hasn't had the most turnovers, but I think in this defense, he will have some opportunities because we do force quarterbacks to have to throw the ball sooner than they would like. Other things which I like about Ward, not only can he just stick to receivers, very, very physical in the ground game. We know how this defense operates, where it's a huge, huge thing for being able to wrap up, not miss tackles. And he's very physical that way, very fiery, very competitive, which is incredibly important at that position. But similar to like an Emmanuel Moseley, who's very physical in the run game, so is Charvarius Ward. So when we give up those like short 2 to 3 yard passes, he's a guy who can make those tackles. So he really is a great fit for this defense, and I think he's going to flourish with the coaching of D'Amico Ryans. And I think in this defense, which is just loaded with star players, Charvarius Ward, the 7th most valuable player for the 49ers this coming season. And coming in at number 6, and the last player in today's video, this one might shock a few of you, but it's going to be Fred Warner. Now, here's the thing which I want to preface by saying, talent-wise, yes, Fred Warner is a top 5 talent player for the 49ers. There's no question about that. He was an all-pro in 2020, just a fantastic player. He's ever since he's got here back in 2018, I believe, he's just been able to make plays, really outperformed where he was drafted in the 3rd round out of BYU. So why is he only 6th? Well, it kind of goes back to something that I've mentioned a couple of times, but this is a video and a series about value, not necessarily talent. If you look at our linebacking core, behind Fred Warner, we have Dre Greenlaw and Azeez Al-Shaair. So both of those guys are fantastic players in their own right. But when we look at value, I like to think of it as, if that player wasn't there, how much of a drop-off is there? And of course, look, if Fred Warner got hurt, hopefully it doesn't happen, but if Fred Warner got hurt, yes, there would be a drop-off, but the drop-off wouldn't be as significant as some other ones. So, I think he's incredibly important to the team. He's typically the player who has the green dot in the helmet, so he's there issuing all calling all the plays to the defense. He is that leader out there. He's really stepped up and become that guy. But, if he were to get hurt, I would still feel fairly okay with having Greenlaw and Al-Shaair out there for more snaps. So this is kind of like a tricky one. The other thing too, which weighs a little bit on this, and I don't want to knock him too much because, look, I'll say it, if I've said it once, I've said it 1,000 times. He's a fantastic player. Wasn't all pro, deservedly. But Fred Warner last year kind of had a down year. No interceptions, only forced 1 turnover. He did have a couple of fumble recoveries, but in terms of forcing turnovers, wasn't really the same guy that we'd seen before. He did have the big forced fumble in the playoffs, so, we'll give him that too. But overall in the regular season, just wasn't the same guy that we'd seen. So I'm really hoping we'll get a bounce back year, a more, typical year for Fred Warner. I'd like to see a couple of interceptions, some more forced fumbles, maybe a few sacks thrown in here, here and there. And of course, locking down other teams, tight ends, running backs, things like that. Overall, love the guy Fred Warner as a player, but in this series, he's going to be coming in at number 6 for my most valuable player for the 49ers in the 2022 season. And that will be it for today's video. I am going to have the final video of this series coming out next week prior to the start of training camp. Really can't wait for training camp. It's going to give, a lot of storylines. There's going to be a lot of great battles, so that's going to be really fun. But of course, with this series, it'll be finishing up next week. Let me know your thoughts on the players, how I've ranked them so far. If you agree, if you disagree, call me crazy if you like. This is just, a list that I made in terms of the value for the team in this coming season. And a gentle reminder that in this list, there will be no Trey Lance. I think it goes without saying that the quarterback is going to be 99% of the time the most valuable guy on the roster. So, spoiler alert, there's no Trey Lance. But overall, let me know your thoughts in the comments, guys. Do please subscribe to the channel if you like what I do. It means a lot, really helps out the channel, and I notice all of it. But I'm going to leave it right there, folks. So, I'm going to say 2 things. The butt counts, and I'm going to catch y'all on the flip side.